Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all here and thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Tuan Nguyen. I'm the Director of Education here at CAM. And I wanted to just talk about the focus of tonight's talk. Basically, we're going to talk about how artists have traditionally responded to issues of inequality, violence, and powerlessness in their practice. And our current exhibitions featuring Mark Flood and Mel Chin have addressed issues of that with their work that centers around the LA riots, Hurricane Katrina, and Occupy Wall Street. And it's within that context that we're going to discuss the tradition of social justice and artistic practice, the efficacy of that engagement, and also how St. Louis-based artists have personally responded to what's been happening recently in our community. So with that, I want to introduce the moderator for tonight, Dee Nichols, who is CAM's community engagement manager, and she's also a social designer and community artist whose works have been highlighted by the Clinton Global Initiative, the Ashoka International Changemakers, Sappy Ideas That Matter Awards, and Echoing Green Fellowship for Social Innovation. Dee is also an alum of the Brown School of Social Work at WashU, and she's also a graduate of the Community Arts Training Institute at the Regional Arts Commission. She has been very active in Ferguson with many projects, too many to list, but the ones that come to mind are the United Story with the Nine Network and the Mirrored Casket Project. So please welcome Dee, and I'll hand over the mic to Dee to introduce our esteemed panelists.
All right, good evening, and thank you, Tuan, for such a great introduction. So I want to reiterate, before I introduce our panelists, really reiterate the purpose of this gathering. Not only to recognize that throughout the course of history, artists have, and art in general, have had that power and that role in social movements and social change making, but to really bring forth more celebration of some of the art that is being activated right now in our own community. As everyone in this room very likely knows, there has been this emergence. I wouldn't even say that it's a new emergence, but there is this energy of unrest and energy of challenge and interest with the recent shootings that have happened to young teenagers in our community at the hands of policemen. And as the nation, as the globe has responded to this, a lot of artists within our own city and within our region have also responded to this either as art organizers themselves, as makers in this movement, as well as people who are just inciting creative ways to get people thinking and shifting their own paradigms about who we are as a culture and as a nation, especially in this crucial time. And so with that, I want to just recognize a couple of different things before we get started. One, this event is being filmed, so just being cautious of that. If there are people who are like, hey, don't put me on camera, just let us know at some time, either after the event or during, just whisper it or something. And how the format will go throughout the evening is that once I introduce the panelists, they each will talk for about 5 minutes about their own involvement with the current efforts in St. Louis, in the region, and in Ferguson as well, but also about a lot of the art that they've been doing even before this. So beyond that, we really want to have this as a space where people can feel open to ask questions, especially those that are related to the art making and to the role of art in this movement. So after they speak, I'll ask about 2 to 3 questions to them, and then we're gonna turn it to you guys to ask some questions, share some more projects that maybe don't get covered in this talk, and then just really have that exchange of dialogue. Does that sound good to you guys? Sweet. So what I'll do, I'll introduce just a snippet of each person, and then as they talk about their art, I just encourage you guys to share even more, because I know I'll miss something. These are amazing people. So first up, we're gonna have Ed Reggi, who will be speaking about bringing artists together and a lot of the elements of intersectionality with the different identities and the different hats and the different faces that we all wear as we're navigating through this region, through these issues. Ed is the creator of Show Me No Hate, and he is a past 9 network community, teaching artists for community producers, so helping people within our region learn how to use filmmaking as a way to give voice and highlight different things in the region. But Ed is also an arts organizer and an activist within the LGBT community. So I'll just stop there and let Ed continue.
Great. Well, good. Loud. Wow. All right. So I think to start off, I think I almost remember a headline, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago where the RFT ran a story saying, what is a gay protester, what is a gay man actor, why is he in the loop, worried about black teens being arrested? And that was sort of the first minute. I don't know if you all remember in the last 4 or 5 years, there was always a rush around the first week of April. The first weather would break in St. Louis in the loop. And there would always be, some gunshots or something would happen inevitably. And then all of a sudden the loop, the University City would almost overwhelmingly overreach and bring SWAT team. And, does everyone remember these? Okay, good. So make sure everyone remembers these. And so one of the very first things that I remember doing is getting involved in that. And the reason why I did, because, as a gay white male that sort of really stood fighting for marriage equality in the last 6 to 8, 7 years in this state, I felt like the LGBTQ alphabet soup that we use to describe ourselves in and of itself is intersectionality. In other words, gay men, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, if you go down the whole alphabet soup, we really, when we're in a room, have very little in common with each other. There's an assumption when I go into a room of transgender individuals that I'm going to sort of relate to them in some grandiose way. And the irony is that I always don't, that gay men don't have the same things in common with lesbian, with bisexual. And even in itself, our acronym, what we have done in the gay movement is to actually form together. So in and of itself, we represent this concept of linking, people that are actually oppressed to kind of band together, find the commonalities, and what can we do to lend our voice, my privilege, my white gay privilege, which is kind of weird to say that, but there's a little humor there, right? So that's where I come from, the basis of it. So some of the images that I'm putting up here. So what is specifically what Show Me No Hate's been doing is sort of using some of the artwork, some of the previous artwork over the years to show solidarity around LGBTQ issues and other individuals of especially black or brown communities. And I was fortunate enough that we had the coming out, National Coming Out Day was just a few weekends ago. It was during the Ferguson October, the big march on Saturday. And so we just sort of kind of toyed with the idea of using Keith Haring's work. The original work is on the left from 1988, and sort of recreating that and thinking about how can we reframe this? We have a march that's happening in St. Louis. What would Keith Haring do? And so we totally changed it and did a hands up for coming out. Let's come out for justice, for equality. A lot of feedback, a lot of actually blowback in my own community. My most big critics are actually other lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people when that image came out. big, pushback. The next image, too, as well, was put out. Another friend of mine said, let's repurpose Keith Haring's work that he used on South Africa during the same time period of HIV and AIDS no funding at the time, and use that to sort of use the issues that were happening in South Africa. So the idea of Free Ferguson, showing some solidarity. Other images, one of the things we wanted to do, what I wanted to do, is to make a call to the LGBT community that was sitting on the sidelines and to say, like, how can you get involved? By just showing up. You don't have to check any boxes or believe in anything, just showing up. So a lot of imagery, a lot of photography that was happening in Ferguson and Shaw neighborhood, and using quotes from very well-known Harvey Milk, Bayard Rustin, trying to repurpose some of the same messages that we saw throughout the 60s and 70s and 80s. And then the last image, sort of what we had last night at the blank space, I think was a great example of that, trying to bring the LGBT community together to talk about where can we stand. We know we have black and brown LGBTQ individuals. If anything, we could stand and come to the table to stand beside them. And how do we begin that? It's going to be very difficult to do, but it's just part of the showing up. And so that's kind of a lot of the beginning work that I started doing, and I'm continuing to do.
All right. So that's a little bit about the perspective that Ed will be giving to tonight's conversations. And before we move on to Mallory, you may have noticed that on some of the images, we have a hashtag. For the conversation tonight, we definitely encourage you guys to take out your phone. And if you have Twitter, if you have Facebook, if you have Instagram, be a part of the conversation and take it beyond this room by tweeting to the hashtag Creative Unrest and keeping different questions, different responses and reflections to what you're hearing tonight going even beyond today, beyond this room. Also with that, there is a table in the back. Because with this gathering, we'll tap into like some action steps and some thoughts on like what's next at the end, but we're very considerate that, hey, we may run out of time, but there is a way for you guys to get involved if you want to, especially in regards to different creative actions. And there's a project called Beyond Today that has been matchmaking and connecting people throughout the city for those types of actions, connecting people, connecting people to action, and connecting people to organizations. And there's a table in the back that will allow you to get connected yourselves. So with moving along to Mallory Nezam, Mallory will speak a little bit on the elements of performance and guerrilla theater and how that comes into play with disrupting our spaces and disrupting our complacency, like our comfort zones, with different actions and different projects that have been integrated not only in our city but across the nation. Mallory, just some key points about her. She is the creator of St. Louis Improv Anywhere, which was started in 2010. And she is also, well, I think everyone up here is a fellow or an alum of the Community Art Training Institute, which is hosted by the Regional Arts Commission. So take it off.
Thanks, Dee. You used a lot of great words, and I'm going to steal them. You can go to the next slide. The context from which I entered this is that my practice has been focused on disrupting public space and specifically breaking through sort of the silent subscription to everyday norms without questioning them. Complacency, safety for the sake of safety. I have kind of a collage of images here. Oh, go back to where we were. Yes, so this is just some of the work that I've done. It's just kind of a random smattering, but all this work's in public space. In the past, a lot of my work's focused on comedy, kind of transitioning a little bit now. But I've learned a lot about how to engage people in public space, and specifically my work's focused on disruption as opposed to direct antagonism. And I find that I've had a better response with people who don't want to hear a message if I disrupt instead of antagonize. So the work is confrontational, and I aim with that work to sort of disarm people and create a space for them to question their own values, to question their involvement in a particular issue, and to hopefully allow for some empathy. My main creative response to the incidents in Ferguson and the death of Mike Brown have been a project called Chalked Unarmed. This is a photo behind me. The very first piece that we did. It was actually planned as a guerrilla theater piece, and it evolved to become sort of a more of a visual art piece that became very spreadable on social media. Basically, Chalked Unarmed involves we have a list of unarmed people of color who have been killed extrajudicially by police and who were unarmed. The list started with men, evolved to also include women from all over the country. Some of the goals of this were to, A, connect the death of Mike Brown to other deaths around the nation, to show that it's not an isolated incident, that it is frequent, and that it is actually a big deal and a big issue that affects more than just the Ferguson community and the St. Louis community. Secondly, we wanted to, the nature of the chalking is performative. So you actually have someone lay down on the ground and you chalk their body. So that is disruptive to see that. It's disruptive to be walking on the sidewalk and see a chalk outline. Some people are quite startled when they see that. You get sort of a myriad of responses, and part of the point of that is to have the public have to confront that, whether or not they want to. Another really great thing about this project was that it was really more than anything a tool that anyone could utilize. So we started it here, but we have encouraged people all over the country to use it. And in some of these photos, there are people all around the country chalking. There have been people really actively chalking in all over New York. Florida, there have been a lot of chalkers. Atlanta, there have been a lot of chalkers. I think Pittsburgh too. So it really caught on. People are utilizing this tool. And in a lot of places where there have been similar unarmed deaths, they're particularly empowered, and they really want to chalk names of people who died in their cities, and that's their connecting point. And another way that I kind of talk about like the 3 bullet points of what I think this does is it's educational. So somebody walking by might learn that there was another death similar to what happened to Mike Brown, and maybe they didn't know this was a common thing. There are other stories similar to this. It's disruptive, so maybe you're going to the Cardinals game and you don't want to think about this, but we're going to say you can't stop thinking about it. We want to remind you that this is still important, and we're all players in this. And then the last thing, there's a memorializing element or an honoring element. Elizabeth Vega, I remember, said one time how important it is to speak a name, the power of the name. And so we were actually writing the date, the location, the name of each individual. So that gets written down, as well as the word unarmed. And those are all 3 important elements. There are some chalkings outside as well right now. So that's been my main project. I've also been really honored to participate in the Mirrored Casket project. Damon and Dee were also a part of that, as well as quite a few other artists that are in the room. And I may have had something to do with the Pumpkin Fest recently.
Awesome.
Thanks.
All right. So just continuing on, next we have Sarah Paulsen. Sarah does not have a Twitter, but you can still just connect with her after the event or connect through the Creative Unrest hashtag. And Sarah, Sarah's a very interesting person because she does so much. So Sarah is a graphic artist, and she's an animator. And a lot of her work, especially before all of this happened, have compelled to use a lot of different drama and a lot of elements of comedy in ways that get us thinking about different social things that are going on. So Sarah will be sharing like some other projects as well, but she called me the other day and she was like, Dee, like, I'm on this panel and I've been creating stuff like in collaboration with other people, but the thing that's on my heart is about what it means for me to be a white ally. And so Sarah will probably be speaking a little bit about that as well. But yeah, we'll let Sarah guide this part of her presentation to you.
All right. I'm going to stand up because I want to see my slides and I feel weird sitting at a table. I think it's because I'm a teacher, so sorry.
Yeah.
But okay, so I guess to start, so for this like past year, I've been having conversations about white privilege, and it's in part because I just have finished making this film called LG Dakani. And so a lot of the death of Mike Brown and this kind of Ferguson movement coincided with my own sort of self-education that's been going on. And so this film was about the Kirkwood City Council shooting that happened several years ago, and how 7 women activists dealt with the loss of a councilwoman and how they kind of made sense of this event. And so, and Cookie Thornton, the man who did the shooting, was an African-American man, really active community leader that was from Meacham Park, a historic African-American community in Kirkwood. And this community became a part of Kirkwood in the 90s and has gone without council members and has been developed upon but still kind of continues. And so making this film, I really understood how race was a part of this shooting and how that history of Meacham Park played into that shooting. And so this led me to become a part of a group called Witnessing Whiteness, which was started at the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA under the leadership of Amy Hunter. And it's a group that was aimed at being there for white people to unpack their own privilege. And through this work, making the film, being in this group, I really started to see some of the impacts of systemic institutional racism, unaddressed racial scripting. And I saw that a lot of the same issues being talked about Ferguson, like white privilege, citizen representation, and the sort of unequal relationship between the governing body that made up the police force and the city council, and then the people that were actually in the community, how that was really very similar to what I had experienced with this Kirkwood project. And so I've been having these conversations, and so everything in Ferguson just kind of solidified the work that I'd started. I did go to some of the discussions that Ed and Dee put together at RAC, and that was really helpful for me. And I think the question that I really left with was like, how can I be a white ally in this movement as this white woman, not being from Ferguson? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. So thank you guys for putting that together. So in this slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on here. So my immediate reaction to the shooting was just total paralyzation. Didn't know what to do. I'd been following a lot of the work of Elizabeth Vega, who sadly could not be here tonight, and she's been such like a leader for me, so I'm really sad not to have her here, but I'm going to talk a little bit about her and what she was doing. So Elizabeth was, from my understanding, connecting with young men and women, kind of coming into their voice at some of the protests. And I felt really drawn to how present she seemed to be with people and with a person's range of emotions. And so I went to one of her training sessions where she was talking about a project called Poems, Prayers, and Affirmations, where she will like basically make a poem or prayer and affirmation for somebody on site. And she encouraged me, so the next day I came to the Ferguson's Farmers Market, and then I went to St. Mark's Church to create some mandala drawings with whoever showed up. And what I really just found was that was mostly just about connecting with a few people. And that was like mostly my first experience. And so I guess a day later, or a few days later, Elizabeth and Chris Mosby, who I saw is here too, Elizabeth had met a boy that was 3 years old, and he said that he saw Mike Brown shot in the street. And so she helped him make a justice sign. I guess they were at Canfield Green, and so she just decided, like, we need to do a project here at Canfield Green. These kids have, like, witnessed things that are really traumatic, and, like, how can we not be there for them as a community? So she started going there. So I just showed up. I think what Ed is saying has, like, been a key word for me too, just showing up. So the first day I went there, I brought some, like, charms, and we made, like, milagro necklaces, which is like a word for miracle in Spanish. And so they're just like these protective necklaces. And, you know, I continued going for the next couple of weeks. I know I was there with Sarah, Griesbeck, and many other people. And really it was just about being there with the kids, talking, listening, laughing. We made a lot of buttons, we sang songs, we worked on the story wall. The story wall is Elizabeth's project where she invites people to come in and make a collage and kind of contribute a message onto this wall. And you can see in this bottom slide, it's become giant. It was like several panels long. So later I was taking some of the panels to my studio and trying to kind of seal and protect them. And I know that this is an ongoing thing that Elizabeth is hoping to display as well. And so I guess for me, this piece was just about being present, being there publicly, having a conversation with the kids, and so that was really, I guess, some of my kind of first involvement. And then I guess you can go to the next slide. I've also been really involved in a lot of the protests and marches, and I guess I want to talk about some of the things I've been seeing my friends do that I think are really beautiful. I love the top. Those are some banners made by my friend Lindsay Scott. She really just wanted to make some beautiful banners. That's what she said. I want to make some banners that are really cared for to march with in this protest. Patrick Ritchie and several other artists, I don't know if anybody else who worked with Patrick is here, he made a giant gigante puppet of Mike Brown for this most recent march, and it was so great to see that scale going down the street. Elizabeth also did an offerenda in conjunction with Day of the Dead, which I think it was kind of along the lines of what you were saying too, Mallory, where she was trying to read all of the names of people that had been shot, and just to have that in a public space. I also know I see Mike Pagano here. I've been enjoying being in his producing class. He's been inviting people to kind of write a lot about Ferguson and reflect and kind of bring that into their own video making. So I've just been seeing a lot of amazing work by people in this community. So, okay, going on to the next thing. So going back to this question then, so like, how can I be a white ally? I wish this was a little bit more clear, but I guess I'll just go through a few of these. This is my diagrammatic understanding of myself and my process over the past couple was. So I see it as like, there's this internal and the exterior. And like the internal is like the work I'm doing on the inside. And like the exterior is like the work I'm doing publicly. And I think like, that's really for me twofold about what it means to be a white ally. So, and I have to say, like, one of my big inspirations is also Steve Holdsworth, who I think is like has a long history of being an amazing white ally and activist, and so I definitely been going to him for guidance. I also am really thankful for Organization for Black Struggle and for what they've been doing. And just like magic, when I heard about this talk, I got this in the mail from Organization for Black Struggle. So it's called The White Activists Organizing Against Racism and White Supremacy. It's by the Justice Institute and the Anti-Racism Collective. And it like very clearly stated for me some things I had been thinking, so I'm just gonna share some of those. So one is the idea that at the heart of any movement, it needs to be an anti-racist movement. And that is one of the only ways that I as a white person can like bridge my disconnection with the community of color, not being a person of color. Another aspect is that artists need to be willing to work under the leadership of people of color. So it's not about me bringing my ideas to Canfield Green about what needs to happen there. Another one is that the work I do has to be about dismantling white privilege. And I think that's in an internal way and in an external way. So I have to be like asking myself the same questions that like I'm asking this community. And that even goes on to educating myself. It's also key to ally with existing organizations. I don't have to start a new project. There's a lot of people that are already doing things in the community. So one of the things is like find out who's doing something and try to plug in through them, see if it's needed. Another thing is being accountable. Like I have to develop a rap with people of color and I have to build a trust to those engaged in this work. If I just show up, it's not, I may not be welcome. and that's okay. And like, not everybody has to trust me right away. And another one, which was, we need to recognize all forms of racism. So sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ageism, any kind of form of oppression, these are all linked together as far as I see. And then finally, like connecting with other white anti-racist activists so that I'm transforming myself, we're transforming the community, and we're doing it together, and we have support to do that work. So I end with, well, one other thing. I'll go back for 1 second, because my other thing too is self-care. If you're doing this work, take care of yourself. This is, I consider this like a big movement. Like Mike Brown was one moment in that movement, but like you gotta sleep, you gotta eat, you gotta process. You gotta have joy moments, you gotta have your intimacy, the things that keep us living. We gotta keep doing that. We do not need people to be getting burned out on this, So take care of yourself. Because I think you gotta do the change inside to do the change outside too. All right, now my next slide. Here's where I'm going. This image was like stuck in my head. Initially it was like a self-portrait. It was like me and how like I'll make something and then I like reject it. And then after I made it, I thought, wow, this really is how I'm feeling about Ferguson as well. Just like how many lives do we have to die? How many like sacrifices are there going to be for us as a society to be willing to change? So that's my work recently. Thank you.
Yeah, clap it up. Yeah. Like, what I'm really loving about what I'm hearing so far from everyone is how are the connections to these other parts of ourselves, and not just thinking that because we are artists or creative people, or this is about art, that it's not about all of these other components of the self and of the individual. And so thinking about that intersectionality that everyone has kind of brought up, I think is very important to the art making. Next, I feel like our next panelist is gonna take it even deeper with some of his works. Damon Davis is not only a visual artist, but he has a clothing line. He is a hip hop artist. He like manages all of these other musical artists. He does so much, and he still finds time to put in the work and be present and be on the front lines. And so we're just gonna let him talk a little bit about some of the works that he's done as well.
How y'all doing? This ain't a funeral, you know what I'm saying? Everybody real quiet, you know what I'm saying? Where do I start? The reason why I got involved, I don't really have a choice. As you can see, I'm a black male. We are the targets for the most part. So, at least in this respect and in this struggle, particularly. And I couldn't just sit by. Like Dee says, I got a lot to do anyway. But it's all pointless if I don't do anything to help other people, quite frankly. So I guess the first main thing I tried to do was bring the artist community together for a meeting, I guess a tactical meeting, you would call it, to come up with creative solutions, long-term solutions to the systemic problem of police brutality and like the murder of innocent black people by police. We did this in 2017. We had a great turnout, way bigger than I ever would have expected. I think we had roughly maybe 100 people. I've never seen 100 people sit down in 2720. I've never seen 100 people with lights on in 2720. So it was it's a big thing for me. Out of this, one of the main things, great things that happened was the Artists as Tutors program. We got started. Currently we are at Dalewood Community Center. A lot of great people signed on for that. They've been helping those kids. Right now we're currently looking for new locations to take it citywide. So We working on one spot on the south side. We looking for a place on the north, west, everywhere. I'm proud of that. I didn't have a lot to do with that, but I'm very proud of my friends that took the initiative and actually stepped up and actually did something concrete. What's the next slide? So, these guys, myself and another artist, Basil Kincaid, who is currently in Uganda, working on another project that we started together called Reclamation, which is about a year old, but it's based on reclaiming St. Louis culture and reclaiming culture in general, and just basically making something new out of something old. He had to leave us. I don't blame him. Africa is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But since then, we have continued to make these lawn sculptures. This was part of a protest or a canvassing of McCullough's neighborhood. We put these in a park in McCullough's neighborhood. This image is quite eerie when I look at it. It didn't feel that scary when we were doing it, but it's got a graveyard feel. And possibly working on doing this on a mass scale with students from CVAP. You guys know where that is? Kings Highway and Arsenal. A kid contacted me about doing it on a larger scale, so we're gonna try to do that. What's up next? So, I did a series of political cartoons for the Huffington Post about the situation in Ferguson and how I viewed it. My favorite one is, Obama riding the fence is great. I really like that one. I really don't think anybody brings that up or says anything about that. So I really like that one. Also, could you go back real quick, D? The class gas is by far my favorite one. The real overarching theme is being ignored in this. We are addressing a symptom of a disease, not the disease itself. See, the disease itself is individualism and the idea that you were against me and I'm against you. And in a capitalist society, somebody has to be at the bottom. So my people were chosen long, long ago to be at the bottom of this society. And I think the way the police reacted, the continued passing the buck, everything, no accountability, that all of that is related to a much bigger theme that goes on in American culture. And that's specifically why I drew that one, the class gas, because I think if it would have been different, if it would have been in another neighborhood, as long as they were minorities, they would have got hit the same way. But the idea behind that is specifically around classism more than anything, and that's the easy way for us to split ourselves up. So, yeah, that's the media. So, this image is of the coffin that we created. Mallory, D, we're all in on that. And let me be very clear. Marcus Curtis, I don't know if he is in here today. Marcus Curtis built most of this casket. I came in, I did a little bit, you know what I'm saying? I took some pictures, you know, I helped him clean it up. I was a hand when he needed, but Marcus Curtis built this ingenious contraption, and I think he deserves the credit for most of that work of creating that. Now, once we get past that, carrying this thing 1.5 miles, I definitely played my part in that, and that was not easy. By the time we got there, I was quite exhausted, and it's not as light as it looks. But I think the message got across. We brought it out again yesterday at the protest in Clayton, and I think this is going to be a primary fixture. I think it works well, and the idea behind it is the death of justice, and police and councilmen and whoever represents that system look into it and look deeply into it and see the depth of it. And not just them. Everybody can see the mirror. Everybody looks at the mirror, and everybody plays a part in why the situation is the way it is. Me, you, everybody. Ignoring it and making it someone else's problem, and I got to go to work today, or I'm tired, or I want to go out. Everybody plays a little bit of a role in the reason why this situation is the way it is today. I think we might be out of slides, but a few other things outside of that I just wanted to mention. I drew a coloring book in conjunction with faculty and students at St. Louis University Law Department. Basically it's a walkthrough for children in how to interact with policemen. I think we have to have that early because most of us get viewed as adults, like Mike Brown, long before anybody else gets viewed as an adult. As soon as you get big enough and you get scary to them, you were an adult. So I think kids really need to understand that. I also did a project with the WashU Social Work School. It's a website and a small zine called Info Empowerment. Some of the WashU students handed things out during Ferguson October, but it's basically a booklet of clear and concise facts that show how different people of color and white people are treated, whether it's health care, whether it's policing, whether it's the way we are educated. There is a clear and concise way and difference in how we get viewed by society and how we are treated by society in comparison to the majority of American society. I like what everybody has said, and multiple times I've heard show up. So I want to say this. You showed up to this, okay? This is safe. This is really safe. This is really, really safe. I challenge you to show up when it's not safe. And that could mean showing up when a conversation pops off and one of your friends wants to throw racial slurs around because they've had a lot to drink or they think it's funny or something like that. Show up then. Stand up then. When you see a little kid that can clearly has self-esteem issues about who they are and where they come from or who they love or whatever it is, show up then. Like silence is compliance. Whether we want to acknowledge that or not, but it is. It's very much so. So if you're doing okay, and I know it's hard, and I know you're not going to do it all the time. Sometimes I just don't want to deal with it, so I want to go home and I want to live. Yeah, that's cool. Every once in a while, you're a human being. But at the bulk of it, if you ignore oppression and you ignore just evil in any way, you agree with it, in my eyes. So I just ask everybody to show up then. Dee asked me to talk about what hand I played in organizing. I have been out there, I've organized. I helped, my role was organizing that rally for Ferguson October. I had a great team with me. I did not do it on my own. And I have met some of the greatest people I have ever met in my life over the last few months. Some of the best human beings ever. I've also seen the worst of humanity too. And it's been a very big eye-opener for me. I've grown tenfold throughout this. Organizing, I guess it wasn't a natural thing to me. I guess I got a little experience with working with musicians and artists and different personalities like that. But this level of organizing I've never run into. So this stuff that you see on this board was natural to me. So the biggest challenge was actually organizing on a political level. And I think more than anything, I've grown in that regard more than anything. So just remember, show up when it ain't safe.
So I actually think that's a really good point to transition to having a little bit more of a discussion for tonight. And I'm gonna stand up because I've been sitting and I get anxious. But just going off of the last couple of points that Damon just mentioned about the political side of the organizing, I started off with writing some questions, but because of time, I'm only gonna ask one question to them, and then we're gonna turn it over to you guys. And Tuan Nguyen, who introduced all of us, he's gonna be a runner with a microphone, as well as Carrie Ann, who's holding the mic. So if you guys have questions that you want to ask to them, or things that you want to say, other works of art that you want to talk about, because there are tons that we haven't even touched on. We definitely want to get some of this dialogue and this engagement happening. My question to all of you guys really regards that element of political will. With the art that you've been making and the art that you've been seeing out in Ferguson and locally, and even before all of this happened, do you feel that art actually has the power to shift people towards political action? Yeah, go for it.
Who going? I go. I definitely, undoubtedly think that. I think, so art and art gains empathy. It works actively against indifference and apathy. That is the root of political division. Democrats, Republicans, all that is division, and it's seeing someone different from yourself. And I think that art is the one tool that is also universal. Music is one of my main things. I don't have to say a word at all. I could make sounds, and if I'm sad, I can make all of y'all in here sad. That's it. If I'm happy, I can make everybody in here happy. It's a universal language. So if you learn how to pinpoint it and you learn how to focus it, and your focus is political awareness or changing the minds of the populace, it can happen. It's been done before. The reason no one ever speaks about, see, the 60s and the original civil rights movement was led by mostly artists. Those people, a lot of those people, they were students and they were artists. And we look at them as like they were just born to be Nelson Mandela. No, like something happened and they got out there. You know what I mean? Like not everybody is born with that. Another thing is a lot of empathy, and the reason why generations now are not afraid of black people is because of James Brown. It's because of Jimi Hendrix. It's because of Bob Marley and Marvin Gaye. Those people and those artists made everybody happy. You know what I mean? So by doing that, a lot of people finally saw us as people. Like when you can verbalize your problems, and then somebody listens, he's like, I got that same problem, so they must not be that much different from me. And I think that's downplayed a lot when we think about the civil rights movement. Was the music behind it and the visuals and the movies that were being created that actually changed people's minds about the situation, not policy. Because before we get to policy, the masses have to change their minds about things. So, yeah.
The masses do have to change their minds before policy, and that's kind of how I always think about the power of art. So I don't think like art can make you want to do something politically. I think there's a sort of a step in between there, which is that art changes how you feel, right? So it can reverberate on an emotional level, and I think that it can shift culture, which is kind of what Damon's talking about. How back during the civil rights era, culture, music kind of changed the way that people thought about the black community. And I think that art also has a a capability to expose people to things in a way that might convince them to be more open to the idea than if they were sort of, it was drilled into their head through like maybe, I don't know, a brochure or the news. It sort of puts people on a similar playing field. I think it allows us to sort of open up the heart channel a bit more instead of just the intellect. It's not just information, it's emotion. And when you can get someone on a level where they can maybe become empathetic, there's the possibility for changing how they feel about something. Changing how they feel about something can lead one to change how they orient their politics, then can lead to action.
Any questions that you guys have, or did you guys want to respond to that?
You know, the only thing I'm going to say is that I think the challenge becomes this microphone, getting it out. There you go. That's not a challenge. I think the challenge for me becomes commercial art versus what we're talking about, sort of like art, because commercial art can be used against us. We've seen it. You know, like images and the way that it presented could actually could actually dictate what we want to, what we should be believing, or we could be manipulated. So I'm always careful to say the art, because I really think there's a lot of bad art that's really shaping the way we're thinking today. That maybe got us into this, and that gets into media literacy, which is like my calling card of life. What's that? I think, you know, I mean, here's the best version of art. So I don't know if you all drive on 40. I live downtown, so I drive a lot heading away from downtown. And, you know, the first day that they put up the Boy Scouts of America sign with that young 13-year-old boy with a, has everybody seen this big billboard with this shot? He's got a rifle, and he's aiming like it's a young kid, 13, 14, white kid, crew cut, like military hair, and it says, whatever the acronym for Boy Scouts of America. It's like, it doesn't even say Boy Scouts of America. It's like giant, BSA, you know. And it's just, it's not much language there. And you go like, why is there a kid shooting me on the high? Like I'm in the scope. Like he's gonna hit me. And then I get closer to it, and it said Boy Scouts of America. And I went, oh, that's right. That ex-lieutenant military guy that had got us in the first war is now in charge. You know this. I don't know his name. Does anybody know the name? The guy who took over Boy Scouts of America. He used to be the first person to go for. That lieutenant is now in charge of Boy Scouts of America. And that's deliberate. He's calling the people that should join Boy Scouts of America, right? So that's commercial art, right? That's art calling me to say like I don't want to be a part of that. I wouldn't have, you know, if I had kids, you know. So, is that specific enough? And I don't necessarily condone. I mean, you know, you might like Boy Scouts of America. I don't, but that's an example. Uh-oh. Are you muted?
Check. Boom. All right. One more example. Fox News. Fox News is clearly theater. It's clearly like no news anywhere in that. And it clearly caters to a specific person that already wants to hear what they're telling them. They don't want really news, they just want to be entertained. And that's a huge, huge outlet for media. That's it. That's all I want to say.
And I guess for me, I think like the act of making art is something for the people that are making that. I think that has like a transformational effect. And I think kind of along the lines of what Mallory was saying, I don't necessarily believe that a piece of artwork changes my mind, but I think it might engage me in a conversation, or it might make me think about something differently. And I mean, I think if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't do anything I'm doing now. I think for me, one of the questions like with everything that's going on now is also like, for me as an artist, it takes time to like find the images, to find the pieces. And you know, I love, recently on NPR, they were talking about great pranks, and they were talking about the prank where Abby Hoffman, I guess, went into the New York Stock Exchange, and he like dropped this bag of money, and how all of the stockbrokers started diving for the money. And like in that moment, like the stock market stopped. And so like that was kind of like his end goal. but he also kind of like was a reflection of society in a way, and he kind of got like that sort of base quality of some of like the stockbrokers to be exposed in that moment, and for them to become participants in that piece, you know. And I think for me, it's like finding the form, that's the hardest thing. So.
Sweet. All right, as we transition to questions from the audience, I just want to encourage you guys, as well as you guys, to be succinct, to be a little bit short with your comments and your responses, because we do have extended time for this event, but we want to be able to get in as many questions, as many responses and reflections and voices as possible. So any questions that you guys have? Yeah. There's a...
Now is it working? Yeah, okay. So from the beginning, I've had an observation, or I've had this experience where I've been afraid that this movement's going to end. And I keep thinking, was that the last thing? Are we going to be stuck in this situation again for the rest of our lives? And what I keep seeing is that somebody envisions the next step. And I see it in signs. I see it in Jelani Brown's banners that say racism lives here. I think he was the first one who made the arch and the arrow pointing down. At least that's the first one I held. And that idea that these concepts keep moving to the next concept, I feel like that everybody who's involved is an artist who's envisioning a future, envisioning how we can make this real, a real change. I don't know, that's a bit of a comment and a question. I don't know what the question part of that is.
Oh, no, thank you. Like, I think
take
comments
it as a
are
question.
great. Yeah.
Well, I want to respond to that. I think what you just said, imagine the next step. And I love that, because I think that's a true intersectionality of activism and art. So activists are imagining the next step for a better world, and artists can do that too. We all are all imagining in different ways, but I think, social political art is probably combining that effort a little bit more. But I think that, in ways activism has this creative component to, envision something that didn't previously exist. That could be a definition of art as well.
Others in the back.
Hi, my name is Gina, and I'm an educator, and I brought my students this evening, and I have a question for Dee, for Sarah, and for Damon. Can social practice be taught?
That is a very great question. And I think it's a yes and no question, or answer, because I just finished grad school, and part of what I studied in grad school was about social practice and the different ways that it takes form, whether in performance or in the visual arts or in experiential gatherings. And I think that there isn't a textbook way of teaching social practice or even community art. I think it takes a lot of learning through experiences. It takes a lot of learning through failing. I think as well, sometimes it's a matter of tapping into that desire to bridge those two sides of your mind, that creative side of, what you're experiencing as an artist and what you're capable of visualizing or articulating and expressing to the rest of the world, and then also thinking about, well, what is the world doing? Like, what's actually happening, and what do people seek to experience? I think merging those two are better ways of teaching about social practice than bringing out a textbook or having long classes about it.
I'm still trying to understand the difference between like social practice, community arts, and relational
That can be
aesthetics.
taught.
And so, I mean, for me, I think, I would agree with Dee that I think you're going to learn way more than just doing it than you are going to be in a classroom. Although I think a classroom could probably give you some ethics that maybe people aren't always aware of when they enter into like a community art practice. So, but I do believe in like learning just by doing. But I'm still trying to figure out what all those different words mean. And
Yes.
for me, social practice sometimes doesn't have as much of like, I don't feel like it's as responsible to a community, that word for me. And I'm trying to understand that. But.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's a matter of putting tools in people's hands. I mean, as an example, here at the museum, we recently had a professional development day for St. Louis Public School art teachers. And a part of that engagement was engaging with social practice and community art and understanding all of there's a long list of vocabulary words that go along with it. But even with engaging in that, I wouldn't say that we taught them like everything that they need to know. I think it's upon them to go out and engage it. And same with a lot of the other projects that we're engaging with teen students in the SLPS school system. We can introduce certain topics, but I think it's a matter of creating that spark within their minds that keeps them engaging more and more and more within their community, with their community, and in collaboration with others.
Just so I'm clear, social practice is making art about social issues. What does that mean? Just give me a textbook definition of what social practice is.
So there's this diagram that Roseanne Wise of the Regional Arts Commission always.
I probably learned this in CAT, right? I'm supposed to remember this. Yeah.
So there are all of these different paradigms with it, with social practice being like at its very core, engaging socially as an artist. And then you get into all of these other terms like community art, which inherently means art that's created by the community or with the community, but not for the community, and changing that paradigm of artists being heroes or creative activists in that sense of like, oh, we're coming to visualize and save the world. Well, no, you're coming to listen and be amongst others. I think as well, social practice also gets more so depicted as a focus on the individual artist and what the artist is doing, whereas community art on that other side of the spectrum is about the we and the us and the collective making. There are a lot of people in this room who may have some other definitions, though.
Yeah. Okay, with that one. So I do think it can be taught. I think it's when it gets taught. I think if you're taught that from the beginning of your life, along with everything else, it will become just part of your being. I think it's probably harder to learn just like a foreign language if you're 25 and you want to get into social practice. It's probably going to be harder to do that. But I think the earlier you get it, the more it will become part of your everyday life, and it will just naturally happen like that. So,
can I just add one thing? I think the social part of social practice is really cultivating good people. They'll make good art about the right things.
Yeah. Very good point. Some more responses, reflections, questions, ideas. Well, I was just about to ask one. Let's go to Steven, and then we're gonna go to, what's your name? Eliza.
So I think there's an agreement in the room, in the panel, and I think for people who came to a workshop like this, that art is transformative, that there is something in the power of art that when we're presented with a crisis in our community, in our social fabric, that we say we can apply art in some way, whether it's social practice or community art or whatever term we want to use, we can apply art to that crisis and come out at the end of the application better than we were before we applied the art. So that's sort of what I'm seeing as people are saying and what I believe. And so the question that has been haunting me for the last couple of weeks is, I feel like I have witnessed some incredible art done with people in crisis, in hurting, who live in Canfield, who live in our community, who've been experienced that. I've seen some amazing art done to lift up the root of somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose. We're a system that is broken and that needs to be changed. I think we've done a great job with that. What I haven't seen, and I wonder why, and I wonder why we can't, is art that is seeking to transform the people with the power to change the system. So why are we not in police departments doing art programs? Why are we not inviting all elected officials to be part of an art program where they could go through a personal transformative process? Because we all believe that art is transformative, or we wouldn't be here, but who are the people who really need the transformation? And so are we going into Monsanto and asking all the employees to be part of a transformative art project? Are we going to Ladue and saying, could you please have everyone in your community be part of this transformative art project? I wonder if anyone has a sense of, am I in outer space la la land? There's no way this could possibly happen. Or is there a way for us to take what we have agreed on is the transformative power of art and use it as a tool to transform those in power to change the system that we all agree is not serving everyone?
Yes, clap. If it's all right, I would actually like to open it up for people in this room to also help answer that question.
Hi, my name's Kristen. To your point that you just made, that's what I've been thinking about a lot. And actually, a moment of just pure honesty, tomorrow I have a meeting in the mayor's office with criminology department from UMSL. And we're talking about this specifically, about art's role in crime in the city, in the police department, and what we could try to do. I actually work next door at the Pulitzer. So I've been thinking about this a lot. So my question to all of you would be, I'm having this meeting, and if there are things that I can take away from all of you and bring to this, what would it be?
I have a fairly wide definition of art, and I think patience and conversation fall under that definition. And I know a lot of friends a lot of peers that are working with nonviolent communication tactics. And this is maybe related to what you were mentioning, or just kind of also what you were saying, is can we bring that kind of training not just to educators and people that can of course benefit from that type of training, but consider that an important art form for the police force to have full appreciation for and using that. We are here in a museum talking about visual arts and social practice, but maybe that could be a suggestion to bring to the government and the police force and maybe it's already there, but just not really being appreciated fully enough to stop the murdering that's taking place in our world. That's all. Nonviolent communication.
Yes.
Well, hello. My name's Richard, and I think one thing that might be interesting is to consider how people are different kinds of learners. So respond to the visual, the oral, the written, and so on, and to be able to figure out how to craft it to reach those different kinds of learners, the things that they might be most comfortable with. And then another thing might have to do with the inherent willingness of any artist to be vulnerable. I mean, that's what doing all that stuff is. And when I think of most police and most politicians, the willingness to be vulnerable is not one of the first things that comes to my mind. But if we can figure out a way to sort of pierce that veil a little bit, that certainly would benefit the whole community.
Do you know, I'm sorry, Dee. So I think, Stephen, actually, you brought this up last night at this forum we had for LGBTQ, AIPS, the whole alphabet soup, and black oppression. And, you know, here's my take on it. I'm not going to say you're in La La Land, but you're pretty close, because it's assimilation. Do we give up? You know, I go into schools constantly. Arts programs are being cut. They're being deleted. Do I focus? I struggle with this as a performing artist. Do I try to convert the folks that are totally ingrained and assimilated already? Or do I forget that there's another generation coming up that is completely, and studies show it over and over, no empathy. There are more and more, we're losing touch with this next generation. So maybe it's a little bit of my New Yorker, Brooklyn attitude that says, I don't know if I really want to focus so much time on those that are totally ingrained and assimilated already. I don't have patience anymore. But I definitely don't want the next wave, the next generations to be like them. I mean, I think you brought it up. You brought up assimilation, and it's pretty tragic. So like a downer.
Sorry. I'm cool. I guess, like, for me, what I've been doing a lot during all of this is I've been having a lot of individual conversations with people who don't agree with me, who feel very differently. With family, my father was in law enforcement for all of his life. He was sheriff of Jefferson City. So we've been having a lot of conversations. I've been having a lot of conversations with neighbors. And that's where I've been putting my energy, and it's been really different for me. Usually I'm more like on the front lines or doing a big project. And in this instance, so many of these things it feels like an octagon. It feels like there's not sides, you know? And I guess I just want to say that, like, it's a really powerful thing to just talk to the people in your life. And instead of blocking someone on Facebook, have a conversation with them. Acknowledge the humanity in everybody. And I don't know, and then talk about that and share that with your friends and your neighbors.
Can I say something to that? I kind of agree with Ed on this one. And I do, a lot of that stuff that you just saw was focused. It wasn't for the people. It was for the police and the administration. The difference is, it's aggression. It's to fuck their day up. It's not to speak to them, or, you know what I mean? Like that's what I'm focusing on, because that's what they doing to my day, every single day. You know what I'm saying? So it may be the wrong sort of feeling to have, but after a while, you know what I mean? Like, aggression moves, and like those people that see it, this is an art project. So like, I agree with you. Art, there's no real definition of it. So we want to do a performance piece. Black Friday, don't go buy anything, okay? Stop the money from flowing. You do that, those people that own those stores will pour money into super PACs, and they will pour money into lobbyists, and those lobbyists will do something to appease the people that are not spending any money, because at the end of the day, that's what it's about money. So that's a performance piece we can do. Like, I'm really about using art for combat at this point. You know what I mean? Cause if we would have won it on the grounds of compassion and humanity, it would have been over hundreds of years ago. So the only way is to, like, really mess with the infrastructure of what's going on, in my opinion.
I guess
to Steve's question and to your question, I'm glad Emily spoke too, because I was going to say something. Emily spoke about her father and sitting and having conversations with her father. And I do feel like it's not Damon's job maybe to have some of those conversations. I mean, that's what I think I was trying to talk about with being a white ally and being privileged. I think that that is a place maybe more where I sit, and I'm definitely interested in what you're talking about, Stephen, and trying to reach and get to that humanity of whoever I'm othering. I think when you talk with the police officers, one thing that I thought was interesting is I found out, because Elizabeth Vega tried to get me to get a list of everybody who's been shot by police in the past year, and it was 30 pages long, and there's not any monitoring system, so this was just everybody who died. And I think like, I think like a common need that police officers and a community have together is like, I think there are positive police officers, and they probably want to be surrounded by other positive police officers. And so I think maybe like appealing to that need, like, don't we all want to know that like, that people are doing things that are in service of the community? And so suggesting like a regulating system, like why doesn't this exist? Even having that conversation, you know, I understand that it's not something that maybe the police force wants to have, but maybe it would build more trust between our community and the police force. So things like that I think might be helpful. So anyways.
I guess I had two things. Well, I was going to talk about art, but I guess I wanted to say also that I think you can't force people to transform. You know, we might want them to, but they're not going to want to. So I think the idea of having, you know, who in the police force is interested in this, and then talking to those people. But I'm a little cynical too. I'm from the Bronx. Hello. But as an artist, I've been doing political work off and on for a long time. I'm kind of old. I'm really struck by what you said about disease being individualism. And I had somebody describe art as something that refers to something other than itself. And the act of making art, although it's you doing it, is not about you. It's the act, activism. Community art, any kind of political art, holy cow. Collaborative art, you better get out of yourself fast. You know, and I think that's the power, all right? And we don't, you know, we work in the system to pass, to do what we want to do. So let's just keep passing and keep doing work and inspiring people, because everybody can do it. And that's the act. So thank you, I really appreciate this.
I saw some other hands.
D, you would?
Yep.
I'm going to try not to be random, but I had maybe two things that I wanted to say. It was about probably the cynicism of the New Yorkers feeling like there's only so many people we can change. There's only so many people that are actually going to listen. And I just want to say I appreciate the white allies. I don't know if that makes a difference in the room right now, but really because I have a role in my life. It's just my life, but you know, I teeter between different groups of people, white people, black people, Asian people. I have like culturally an array of different friends. And I go to a predominantly white church, but when Ferguson, when Mike Brown was murdered, a church that's usually one that's talking about renewing the city and social justice, they all went quiet. And I'm only like one of 3 black people there. And I've had to remove myself until the conversation happens. And I finally was able to speak with the associate pastor. We're in the middle of trying to find a senior pastor right now or whatever. But I had to make it known that the silence perpetuates the very thing that happened in Ferguson. I can't be the only one ready to have the conversation. Found out there's some people that are quiet about it because they don't know that other people want to have the conversation too, and they want to have the conversation, and they don't know the perspectives of people like me or people that I know. There's not one way to be black, but I definitely have one perspective. There's definitely other perspectives. There are definitely mothers who have lost their children or who fear losing their sons to this. So I say, white allies, please keep working. Please, I'm an artist, I vocalize, I'm a singer and everything, and I try to use that, and I try to collaborate and reach out to people, and I do theater. Last year I was in Parade, so if you know anything about Parade, it's about Leo Frank, who was lynched in 1915. Only Jewish white man ever lynched in this country. So it hits the white community in spurts, but to bring it home and actually have and learn as a culture how to have healthy conversations about race so you can dismantle all the preconceived notions and the fear that we have of each side. Just keep having the conversations.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say, I think it's really exciting how your work is going national and other cities are taking what you're doing, and St. Louis has just become extremely relevant. And it's been interesting watching this struggle between St. Louis has always had in wanting to be relevant but being provincial and keeping people out. And I've heard people complain about these outsiders need to stop coming in, and I remind them what defines a vibrant city is that outsiders come there. You know, so I'm really excited about what's happening. I'd like to hear your thoughts on how, you know, your work has been exported and also interactions that you've had with people from around the country when they gather here, and if you think this is the cusp, if we're going to be an epicenter of some kind of big change here.
I guess that was a question for me. You guys can hop in too. There have actually been some artists and activists that have come in town and knew about our Chalked and Armed project and have been really excited about chalking with us and then taken that back to their cities. So there's been a lot of, it's been nice to actually meet some of those folks from around the country that are excited about this. Do I think we are going to become an epicenter for, I don't know. That'd be great. I mean, I think we are, I hope that one of the things that people will take away looking into the future, when this becomes history, as an artist, is that there were a lot of really thoughtful and emotional and passionate responses to what happened. One piece that we haven't talked about yet that was really powerful was the Requiem for Mike Brown. I was not involved in that, but I know some folks in the audience were, and that also was spread around the country and the world, and that to me is a really great example of you know, communicating a really powerful message to an audience of, it seems like some people that really got it and some people who really didn't want to get it and didn't get it. So kind of reaching both of those types of audiences that Stephen's talking about. But really just beautiful, emotionally powerful and potent. And that, I mean, I think that's something you don't see coming out of a lot of other places right now. It's really hard to prove a point and to also bring some sort of like joy into it. So it's a very sad, frustrating subject, but there's this hopefulness that piece was able to capture, and also historical context. I mean, and very thematic. It was beautiful. I also wanted to just add a thought to Chris and your question. So I think a lot about, with my work, I think a lot about who my audience is, because I'm always in public space, so I never really have control. I mean, to a certain extent, I have control over who I'm talking to. I can choose, we did Chalked and Armed at Frontenac Plaza. We chose that audience. We did it downtown, we chose that audience. We didn't go do it in, you know, like, right, or we didn't go do it in the Loop where we might have more allies or something, or on Cherokee Street where we might have more allies. But we chose to do it in these places where people probably didn't want it. And you get to see lots of different responses there. We were almost arrested at Frontenac Mall for chalking. The cops were kind of stalking us. But so audience is super important. I think that you, as an artist, doing work in response to Mike Brown's death and all the other deaths, I think we have a responsibility to think about who our audience is and what we're trying to communicate. I would create work differently if I were creating it for a different audience. So I think it can be more powerful when we think about who we're making the art for and with. And then also, I find that if you really want artwork to change people who are resistant, I brought up this idea of being disruptive but not confrontational. And Damon, you said, what did you say? Art for combat. I'm down with that, and I think you're doing a great job of that. My art has some combat in it, but it's also trying to be a little bit more subversive, and I think there's a power in that approach as well. I think there's a power in every type of approach, but in order to change the people who are sort of already sold into what they believe, as the New Yorkers are saying, we have to think about how we're asking them to change, what the questions are and what the method is, because you can't just be like, you're bad, do it differently, you suck. The message needs to be really different. It needs to be, oh, what did you say? Like, I'm actually kind of listening a little bit. So how you ask that and what kind of artwork you create to engage that conversation is, that's a challenge, and that's requires a lot of thought.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. We have actually reached our time. And there are so many things, like even with hearing these last few comments from Mallory brought up more and more questions in my head. And I still have this whole sheet of questions that I wanted to ask, especially about things like collaboration. I think some of these artists highlighted that, the projects that they're working on, it's not just them. And even though these are individuals speaking on behalf of different projects and different experiences, it's not about you. It's not about me. It's not about the artist per se, but about that collective movement. And even within this audience, there are so many people who have been on the front lines of so many of these projects and other projects that we didn't even get to explore and talk about tonight. And so a couple of different things before we head out. One, let's keep talking about it, maybe not in this room because the museum has to close, but online. Once again, at the hashtag Creative Unrest on Twitter, I will definitely be tweeting all night to different responses and questions that have come up. All of the artists who have Twitter usernames or handles, they've also agreed to answer any questions that are directed directly to them. And so we definitely want to keep the conversation going. But in addition to that, we didn't get to the point of talking about what's next. And there are a lot of different things that are going on and a lot of things that are coming up. One quick plug that I'll make is for the Hands Up, Don't Shoot exhibition that opened this past Friday at, I think it's about 10 different galleries across the city, some that are even in this immediate area. So I definitely encourage you guys to Google that and research it and go and visit some of these artists' works that have been created and inspired by this movement. In addition to that, once again, in the back table, we have our Beyond Today project. Sophia's doing a hand wave. Please get connected. Once you give us your name into our database, you'll get a message from either me or Sophie or someone else saying you've been matched. And we'll be connecting you guys not only to each other in this room with being a part of this experience tonight, but also a lot of the other artists, a lot of the other individuals who have been sparking new actions and moving and shaking, including some of the projects and people who have been mentioned tonight. So definitely get that happening. And I feel like I'm forgetting something. Any last thoughts from you guys? Anything coming up or anything coming up? A shameless plug, yeah.
Really great, really, no kidding, a lot of love. And I just want everybody to maybe look up the website of the St. Louis Police Department and see what their mission statement is. is really awesome. And maybe we just need to hold the police department accountable for what they say they do and what they promise to do. We should all read that and be in the know of what it is that they perform for us. They're paid to do it, and they say they do it. Let's hold them accountable.
Very, very great point. All right. I know I said, hey, tell us shameless plugs, but I'm getting an IQ from Tuan to wrap it up seriously. So once again, thank all of you. Give yourselves a round of applause. And as well, to our panelists, thank you all for sharing. And in some cases, even being very vulnerable in sharing of your own experiences. And of course, thank you to the museum for allowing us to extend beyond our time. Yeah, there are a lot of great things. Just final note, get on Twitter, connect with us. Let's keep this conversation going.
Show up.
Show up.